Hello and welcome back to another episode of Mr. Walker's APES. Now we're going to talk about the solutions to the problems we had in the last video. What are some ways that environmental scientists, agricultural specialists, agronomists, etc., working towards keeping agriculture and food sustainable? So this is sections 4, 6, 9, and 10 of your textbook in chapter 14. So, growing techniques for traditional agriculture have been doing what is called a monoculture, which you plant one crop, you grow it, that's it. You specialize in that crop. Today we're doing alternatives to that. We've got interplanting, which is a category that involves polyvarietal cultivation, intercropping, agroforestry or alley cropping, and polyculture. Alright. First, let me start by saying that the difference between polyvarietal and polycultural is that polyvarietal means that you have different varieties of the same crop. For example, you're growing corn. Well, you're going to grow species A, species B, and species C of corn, or variety A, variety B, and variety C, all of corn, though. Polycultural is different plants. Alright, you've got corn, wheat, soybeans, and alfalfa all growing in the same area. Alright, that's what polycultural is. Intercropping is two or more different crops grown at the same time. Alright, but you're going to harvest them at the same time. For example, corn and peanuts in the same field. Okay, and then agroforestry is exactly what it sounds like. You're doing trees, the forestry, and the agriculture, the agro, together. Trees and plants together. That increases the biodiversity and helps out with shade and those sorts of things. And I'm going to show you pictures of all of these as we go through. Now, we talked about one of the biggest problems with agriculture is just the loss of land. We're losing land. We've got major land degradation problems. And so we need to conserve our land. Alright, so here we have a tractor who is plowing his field. Notice how it's completely bare. There's nothing growing on it. If there were a wind to come along, a lot of the soil is going to get blown up in the wind, and he's going to lose it. So how do we prevent that? Well, we can do what's called conservation or no-till farming, which is where they don't till the soil. They just prep it by cutting, harvesting the previous crop and then doing a mix on it, kind of. Rather than tilling these nice long rows, you just kind of do like a gentle mix on it to get the nutrients in, but then that's it. Terracing is really cool. They do this in Asia. It's if you're farming on a really steep slope, to prevent the soil from running off as the water goes down the steep slope, you can build these terraces in, which are kind of like steps where the water has to hit and it slows down and so on. You'll see what I'm talking about. We have contour farming, strip cropping, cover crops, agroforestry, windbreaks, and shade-grown crops. So let me go through and show you all the pictures and what we're talking about. Alright, so conservation or no-till farming. This is what I was talking about. You see how they're just leaving, some crops out. Okay, so he's got some grass strips out. On top of that, he's just gently mixing in this leftover from the harvest. It's not completely bare. Still, will hold some soil, all that sort of stuff. You just don't want to disturb the soil very much. Okay, you just want to break up the soil, plant your food, and then that's it. Alright. Terracing. So this is the one that I said they do a lot in Asia, especially for rice paddies. Alright, so see how this is really, really, really steep terrain. Okay, well, if it rains on this, it's going to wash away all your soil. So what they've done is, over centuries, they've cut these little steps or terraces into the mountain. So when it rains, it hits the flat part. It has to fill up this flat part. Then it kind of runs over like a waterfall to the next flat part, and the next flat part, and so on, all the way down. Definitely helps. Okay, keeps the soil where it's supposed to be. Strip cropping. Alright, strip cropping is what you see here, where they're all in strips. This would be a polycultural, okay, or intercropping technique, where you're planting 2 or more crops in an area with the intent to either harvest them at different times, polycultural, or at the same time, intercropping. Alright. Cover crops. Alright. So this would be a cover crop. This looks like it's alfalfa. As I mentioned in some previous episodes, traditional farming says you grow one type of crop in the summer during the growing season, then during the winter you have nothing there, and it's just bare ground until you plant your next crop. Well, that's changed, and now they're saying, okay, well, I'll plant corn in the summer, but then in the fall and the winter I'm going to grow alfalfa or clover, okay, something that can grow in the winter, and I can harvest later, and I can sell it to horse farmers, okay. Horses love alfalfa and clover, so you're getting 2 crops on the same piece of land, which is part of the Green Revolution, but also it keeps the soil in place. If you've got a crop there, those are roots. Roots hold soil in place. Agroforestry. Agroforestry is growing trees with crops. So here we've got corn growing with some trees. Increases biodiversity. Increases habitat for other animals, including pollinators. Like you could put beehives up in these trees. Allows the shade to help keep some of the crops from getting sunburnt. You could even have fruit trees here. Okay, so then you get fruit and corn. So generally beneficial and helps keep soil in place, helps keep the environment sustainable. Windbreaks are exactly what they sound like. They are breaks for the wind. So in this case, they've got some sort of low-lying crop growing, and then trees around their fields. The reason that this works is that wind, if it hits a tree, is going to be slowed down. If you can slow the wind down, it's less likely to carry the soil away. Okay, this is also good for around your house to help keep your heat and cooling inside your house, and by doing that, you save on your energy bill. Okay. Finally, shade-grown. Shade-grown crops, the best example is coffee. Coffee grows best in the shade with lots of trees where you've got biodiversity. At some point, though, somebody said, I bet I can increase productivity if I just say, let me grow it on a plantation or on an industrialized farm with machinery and everything. Yes, you get more crop that way, but the crop is of lower value. So a lot of places have caught on to this and started asking farmers to go back to the shade grown to get a higher quality crop, and then they sell that at a premium. Like this coffee here, it says premium shade grown coffee. Okay, and people do claim it tastes better and that it's better for you, that the coffee is just better, because that's the natural habitat of coffee, is in the rainforest, under lots of trees and everything. So when we took it out, obviously it started having some problems. Alright, so what are we trying to do? Remember back to our first video, said we want to do certain things. We want high yield food. We want to be able to feed everybody. We want to distribute food better. Well, here are the ways that you can do it. Things that we want to do to be sustainable. We want to increase things like polycultures. We want to increase the use of organic fertilizers like manure. We want to increase the use of natural pests to control our pests instead of pesticides. We want to do crop rotation, all these sorts of things. Things we don't want to do. We don't want to have more soil erosion. So we want to decrease soil erosion, decrease salinization, decrease overgrazing, decrease overfishing, etc. And the ways to do that are with the sustainable agricultural practices that were in the previous slides. So now just some last little tidbits. Okay, fertilizers and soil fertility. It is absolutely essential that you have fertile soil if you wish to be able to grow crops. So we put fertilizer on them. However, if it rains shortly after fertilizer is put on, or you put too much on, then it runs into the lake and you end up with eutrophication, which is what you're seeing here. The algae have completely overtaken this lake, which is why it is green. This is a huge problem in this area. You can go to many of the small ponds and lakes around here, and they have up notices about eutrophication and fish kills because of that. So crop rotation and organic fertilizers will help prevent this. Okay, organic fertilizers are much lower in these nutrients, so when they run off, it's not so bad. They also naturally degrade and all that sort of stuff. And crop rotation makes it so that hopefully you never have to fertilize. You can plant a crop that uses nitrogen and then a crop that fixes nitrogen and alternate. That's crop rotation. Irrigation. I'll draw some of these pictures in class. A good way to water crops is to keep the water low to the ground, so it's not going to evaporate. It goes into the soil. To only apply as much water as the plants need, so less of it is percolating into the groundwater or running off of the surface. Alright, unfortunately we're not doing that. What we're doing is traditional irrigation, which is where you spray water over top of the crops. You don't put the hose down near the ground. Wind and evaporation take a lot of that water away. You're just watering all the crops the same. Okay, so it doesn't matter if you have wheat and corn. Wheat does not need much water, corn needs a lot of water, and you're just spraying the whole field with enough water to feed the corn, and then whatever extra is extra, and it just runs off. So that's a problem. So how are we increasing the amount of food? We're increasing food with artificial selection and crossbreeding. That's been going on for a very long time. Natural selection has produced the food that is wild. Artificial selection has produced the food you see on your table. For example, corn has been artificially selected for hundreds of years to be bigger, to be all yellow, to produce more ears per plant, etc. Wild corn is actually really tiny and it's multicolored. Doesn't have big kernels, all that sort of stuff. You might have seen it and heard it called Indian corn. That's the wild variety. Then you have genetic engineering, where we're not just artificially selecting, we're actually manipulating the DNA of the plants to do things that we want them to do. For example, a tobacco that produces more nicotine, or a potato that gets bigger, or the stay fresh tomatoes that they last longer before they rot, that sort of stuff. And that falls in line with the genetically modified organisms. A genetically modified organism is something where we've done genetic engineering to make it better for agriculture. BT corn is a really good example. BT corn was developed by Monsanto. They're a really big agricultural company in the United States, and it's a corn that produces a toxin from the bacteria Bacillus thuringiensis is the name, and that toxin is poisonous to insects that try to eat it. So if the corn is naturally producing the toxin, then it won't get eaten and you don't have to use pesticides. Further green revolution techniques, better fertilizers, better pesticides, etc., and introducing new foods. Traditional American diet has been steak, potatoes, corn. That's about it. Steak, potatoes, corn, and other meats, but no other vegetables. Well, now we're starting to see things like couscous. We're starting to see exotic fruits and vegetables be brought in, and that helps reduce the load on the Midwest where they're growing corn and wheat, because now we can extend the load across a wider area. It also gives farmers new options for doing crop rotation and things like that. And organic farming, which has really picked up in the last decade, doing everything naturally. So, what is the government's policy on food? Why don't we have super expensive food if it's costing all these inputs? Why don't we, have all these problems? And things that the government does. Number one, they keep food prices artificially low by giving farmers money. They tell farmers, we're going to give you X amount of money so that you will sell your corn to Giant at a cheaper price. And by selling the food to Giant at a cheaper price, that of course is passed on to the consumer. Well, that's a problem, because that means that we're going to eat more than we should. If you can eat, a Papa John's pizza, for example, is $10. Okay, that's always their deal. $10, large pizza, 3 toppings. Well, you're more likely to buy one pizza for each person in your family than to just say, okay, a serving size is 2 pieces, that's all you need, that's all your calories, so we'll order one pizza for 4 people. And so we tend to overeat and use more food than we should. So it would be best if we just eliminated the price controls and subsidies and we said, let the market decide. Okay, farmers will decide what they need to sell their crop for. We will pay for the food, and that will be that. So you have to think about it. Obviously the food prices will go up, but eating will go down, so we'll be healthier, we'll make better choices about food, we won't be eating McDonald's all the time, stuff like that. And quite frankly, Americans are spoiled. Americans on average spend only about 2% of their annual income on food. Most other nations, it's as high or higher than 40% of their income goes towards food. So we'll see what changes in the future, but right now this is the policy, number 1 and number 2. We keep the food prices low by giving farmers subsidies. Alright, so that's it. Main thing for this is, what are the sustainable agricultural practices? So maybe rewind, go back, look at those pictures of terrace farming, strip cropping, etc. See what they're all about, figure them out. In class we'll talk about irrigation, we'll talk about fertilizers, we'll cover some of these other things and talk about things like fair trade. If farmers in America are getting subsidies, how can international farmers compete, and is that fair? Alright, so I hope you learned something, and I'll see you next time.